If you're playing it safe, you are limiting yourself. Today, we're going to talk about two powerful ways that you can accelerate your growth in your career and as a leader. I'm Rusty Gaylord, and this is Do Something Different, a leadership podcast. I am excited to have Krishnan Venkata with us today. He is a chief client officer at Latent View Analytics. He joined there over 15 years ago when it was just 10 employees. He established the US office and has grown that office and the company to over 2,000 employees today. So he knows what it means to drive and grow a business. So, Krishnan, I'm super happy to have you with us here today.
Thank you, Rusty, for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So before we jump into some specific topics and these two powerful ways I talked about earlier to stretch yourself and grow faster, I just want to hear your thoughts on this dilemma that I think a lot of employees face. Employees and a lot of smart, ambitious people want to grow. They want to become a better leader, and yet they also feel this need to do excellent work in their current job. And I'm wondering how you think about that tension and how you have seen that reflected either in your own career or with others.
No, I think that's a great question, Rusty, and thanks for kicking things off with that. And this is something that I have reflected upon as well over the last 15 odd years that I've been in the US. Um, in reality, what differentiates a lot of people is the amount of risk that they're willing to take in their personal life versus even in their professional life in terms of what risk they take and in the expectation of really being passionate about it with not worrying about the downfalls of it, not being too balanced in your view, right? I think that's where entrepreneurs really shine in terms of the fact that they really take a big risk, right? They risk almost everything and say that they'll put their money behind where their passion is. Even in corporate life, I feel that sometimes a lot of people are ambitious, but they're not willing to take risks. So they say that, you know what, I want to get bigger responsibilities, better responsibilities. However, it's important to know that some responsibilities could actually not be just additive. It could be something that will replace what you're doing currently, right? And I have seen this in my personal example also. I mean, I was working in India, and I had the opportunity to come to open the US office and work in that engagement, right? It was a big risky move in the sense we were established. I was set up in India, young family, but bag and baggage, I moved to the US. It was possible that in 6 to 9 months I'll have to move back. Um, but that was a risk that was worth taking. It was a risk that I took when I moved out of a bigger company that I worked in IT services and joined a startup, right? It was a risk when I was managing the West Coast operations for about 7 years, had grown it about to about a $20 million business, and then took it all away and took the role of sales, head of sales, where I had not gotten specific only experience in doing sales. I was doing account management also. So the ability to be able to take risks is important. And I think that's the new roles has actually given me much more fresh perspective into doing things and has helped me a lot. So I think it's very important.
Yeah. I love that. And I think that it's one of the challenges I think especially corporate leaders face is, corporate environment tends to be a little bit more risk averse compared to entrepreneurial environment. And I'm wondering, like you just described, and the way you describe it sounds very easy, right? In retrospect, you say, well, this was a risk and I did it and it was successful. And this was risk and I did it and it was successful. But in the moment of making that decision of having to facing a risk and being willing to move forward, how do you talk yourself through that decision process? Because you're stretching outside of your comfort zone and there's some degree of fear. How do you talk yourself through that? Or how would you talk someone else through that kind of decision?
I think the important thing is not to overthink it in some cases, right? Sometimes we think too much in terms of it. And I make those mistakes as well. I'm not immune to those. I think in certain cases, I'm quite risk averse, right? In some places, I feel that maybe it is you need to take certain decisions. Maybe you need to go for a strike that you have to do. You can't be too defensive all the time. And you're going to make some mistakes. You're going to learn from them also. It's not the end of the world, right? So I think at the end of the day, first, don't overthink it. Um, have a bit of a pros and cons in terms of it. And get a view in terms of what's there, and be pragmatic about it. Say that give yourself a certain amount of time, take the risk, see whether it pans out. Otherwise, there's always a new decision, and take it as a learning experience. The best thing you can do to yourself is saying you will not fail. You will learn from the experience, right? And that is the positive that you can take from it. You're not going to lose everything, or you're not going to take a step back in your career. It's something that you have learned, and that will make you feel more confident. The problem a lot of times we have is we just overthink the negative side of it a lot instead of the positives, right?
Yeah.
We say, oh, what will happen if this happens? What will I do? Will I get it? And all that. And there's no real answers to that. I mean, so I think in some way we should absolutely be not overthinking it. We should keep it very simple, be pragmatic, and take some risks.
Yeah. I just had a conversation with a client earlier this week who was describing feeling very anxious because they were being asked to do all of these new things that they were uncomfortable with. And just reframing that experience from anxiety is a bad thing to anxiety is a natural consequence of stretching outside your comfort zone, getting opportunity and doing new things, facing challenge. And I think this is one of these key principles that you had mentioned that I wanted to bring up today, which is this idea of growth through challenge, which is that if you want to grow in your career, one of the best ways to do that is to take some of these risks, to accept new challenge, to lean into something that's difficult.
Yeah.
So you shared earlier some of the risks and some of the steps that you've taken. Maybe you can take one of those as an example and just share how that has shaped you as a leader. A new step that you took, a challenge that you confronted, a risk that you took, and what you learned as a result of that.
Right. I think there are multiple things that I can talk about, but let me take something that is fairly close to my heart. That after about 7 years in the US, I had been doing account management, managing the West Coast operations for Latent View from 2010 to 2017. My CEO came to me and said, "Hey, you've managed to grow this. It was pretty good. We were growing year on year. We were meeting our targets, doing pretty well. But one of the big challenges that my CEO said was we were not opening new accounts or new relationships, and all my experience was very West Coast based. So I started noticing that people were saying, "Oh, you know what? You're opening accounts in West Coast because that's easier to open, or it's easier to work with technology companies and analytics." So I said, "You know what? That's very interesting that people think." And I thought it was not very easy to do it, but that's the perception that people have, right? So the role that I got was to give up the West Coast operations and take the role of setting up from scratch a sales team, which we had never done. And I think the next 3 years, the amount of learning I had into applying that to full of America, right? I was traveling across North America, meeting clients in different industries, different walks of life. I was also extremely successful in opening multiple accounts in multiple locations. But what that gave me was actually really good perspective. In fact, I also traveled internationally to Netherlands, UK as well, and started understanding this one. That's when I truly understood what does true global experience mean. Why is it important not to have just local experience or in a certain geography, right? How clients think, what are the things that influence decisions, etc. That actually really, I feel, uh, gave me a lot of confidence in terms of taking new challenges, right? Because we were successful opening new accounts that we couldn't open. And in fact, a lot of what we are doing at Latent View was a reason, and what a lot of the clients that we won was the reason for that pivot, right? And I was responsible in that big transformation in terms of how we were as a. But I think all of it stemmed from it could have panned out in 1 year. I would have figured out that I'm not cut out for the role. We wouldn't have done much, and that's fine. It's okay. It's okay to make it, and we would have learned something through this. But that learning experience is what I tell a lot of my team: is take the risks. If you're good, you'll figure it out.
So, Krishna, one of the things I talk about a lot is this balance between skill set and mindset. And when you go off and do something new, you went off and you started a sales team, which had never existed in the company, and you hadn't done it before. So you're creating something from scratch without a lot of context. And I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the skill sets required to do that, because clearly there's skills required and the mindset required, because I think part of what we've been talking about is this mindset about tolerating risk, leaning into something that's uncomfortable, but that challenges you and gives you opportunities to grow. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the relative importance of those two.
I think it's all mindset, Rusty. To be fair, I think if you put your mind to it, you will figure it out in terms of this, right? I don't think a lot of things about skill set is overrated in terms of what skill is. If you don't have the mind, all the skills can take you nowhere. I mean, we have seen in sports. Sports is a great example of teaching us about entrepreneurship and corporate life. You may have the best skills, but you won't become the best player unless you have the mindset to do that, right? You need to be that that very good in terms of it. So you will see sparkles. Nick Kyrgios is a great example. I think talent on the tennis court, I don't think there's anybody who could beat him to that. But he's not won a single Grand Slam till date.
Mm.
And we had Nadal, who people think was only a fraction as talented as a lot of people. And look at how many he's won in French. And all of that comes down to mindset and that ruggedness in terms of it. And of course, these are two, I mean, they're extremely talented players. But what I'm trying to get at is, I would say that, yeah, maybe there are certain things that you will not be skilled and you cannot get to, but about 80 to 90% of things is not brain surgery, right? It's very commonsensical, etc. It's all mindset. I think what I really value in people when I look for people is, do they have the passion and the drive to do the to 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 do the role that they want to do? If they are passionate and if they have the drive, if they're driven to do it, they will figure it out. They will figure it out. They will not sit happy. They will not be content. They will continue to do it. And you'll be surprised how much they are able to overcome the skill gap with the mindset.
Yeah.
You cannot use your skill set to cover the mindset gap. It's just not possible, because you will, if you don't have the mindset, and if you have, so I like the one thing that Michael Jordan had said, right? You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take,
Hmm.
right? So that's how skill set is. If you don't have the mindset, you can have all the skills, but you're not getting it there. But if you
Yeah.
have the mindset, and even if you'll make up for the lack of the skills, is my whole point. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. You know, I have often say that 80% of your success is determined by mindset, and the other 20% is mindset. It's you know,
That's much better way to put it. Yeah.
it's funny, but I think that one of the challenges that smart people face is we want to learn more. We want to brush up on the skill set, and so many people say, "Well, I need to take this course, or I need to read this book, or I need to get this skill." When in fact, so much of what we're talking about of this path of success,
I'll
of facing
I'll give you an
challenge is
interesting
mindset.
example. When I was in 2004, 2005 in Chennai, I got this opportunity to work with Ameriprise Financial, or I was getting interviewed for a role
Mhm.
of in Ameriprise Financial, and I had to take this call in which I was interviewing. And those were the days of which we can't even think of right now, of the VoIP phones, where the voice over internet protocol phones or the direct calls. Direct calls are expensive internationally. I was in India calling to Minneapolis, and I started making the call, and there was the director on the other side, and I was just an analyst. There was a director and there was a lead who was part of the project, in which I was supposed to be a business analyst. I had no financial services background, no requirements gathering background, no business analysis background, in the sense, in the true sense of what they were looking for. And I had one of my things where I will not fudge my experience. I'll just say exactly what I am in my experience. So people had said, "Why don't you say that you know how business analysis?" I said, I don't have that experience. I won't put it. So I was on this call, and I called them, and they said, five about 5 minutes into the call, they said, "Krishnan, we just are not able to hear you. You sound very muffled. So can you do something about it?" So obviously I was stressed, right? I'm on an audio call. I'm not able to do this. So I said, "Can you guys give me a minute?" So I cut that call, called IT, and I somehow figured out in terms of this, and decided to call them directly from my cell phone, which was a pretty expensive call, but I decided, let me just do that. And I called them, and they said, "Now we can hear you." And they did the 30-minute call or 45-minute call, talked about stuff, etc. And after a few months in Minneapolis, when I was in Minneapolis and I was talking to this lead, and she said, "One of the best decisions we had was we selected you, we got you on board." And I was said, "That's very kind of you," because they were very welcoming of me. So I asked her, let me be, and sometimes I do this. I ask them, "Hey, I did not have any business analysis experience. I did not have any testing experience. I didn't have any financial experience. I didn't know what Ameriprise was. Why did you guys select me? I mean, there were so many other more capable people." So they said, "Krishnan, in that call, when you started the call, there was a crisis. We couldn't hear you. And you did not break down. You figured out how you could get onto the call and do that call." They were sold at that point of time.
Hmm.
It didn't matter what the skills I had, whether I knew all of this. They said, when put under crisis, he'll be able to figure a way to solve it. And that's all they. So all they were looking for is this person ready to solve and figure out way things, and that's all they gave credit for. So, and that was a truly eye-opening experience for me in terms of skill set versus mindset. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it reminds me of you know, you shared that some of your best learnings have been through working with difficult clients and solving their problems. And it's the same thing. It's just this mindset of saying, I'm not going to be overwhelmed by a problem and shut down by it. I'm going to lean in and go find a solution. And it's just that willingness to confront a challenge that is so useful.
In fact, clients value that, right? They know that are not going to always be right.
Yeah.
What they're looking for is when things don't go right, are you able to stand up and make things right for them?
Hmm.
I've had multiple of my clients whom we have gone through crisis. We have solved that. We have pivoted that. We have had things, etc. They're very good friends of mine now. And in fact, they become and joke about some of those things that they said when shit hit the fan, you came and you were able to do this, etc. And I value that.
Yeah.
In fact, I tell a lot of people, crisis has got two very big benefits. One, you have a job security because the reason you're there is to handle crisis. So be happy that there are some crises. Second is post crisis, those customers are customers for life.
Hmm.
And and I've seen some of my people who have come and who have embraced the crisis
Yeah.
have really been able to develop very strong client relationships, because that's what at the end of the day you want somebody who knows, who understands you, and who's going to fix your problem for you, or at least attempts to fix your problem. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
absolutely. I want to pivot a little bit to the second topic, and so we've been talking about the willingness to face challenge and to take risk as one of the key accelerators of growth in your career and as a leader. The second thing that I want to introduce is this willingness to embrace and engage with people outside of your company. And I'm just curious from your experience, what you've seen. Obviously, you've described already in this conversation multiple places of how you've engaged with others around the world. And I'm curious what you see when somebody stays too inwardly focused inside the company. What's the implication of that?
I think, Rusty, we all need to do that a lot more. Personally, I need to do this a lot more, but I think that's big feedback that I give to a lot of my team members, and I hope to continue to give to them is we need to think outside of our realm of what we work from professional and personal life, right?
Mm,
Professionally, we are in this role of what we are doing, our current job is, but you need to meet people from different walks of life, not always which is directly related to what you're doing. They bring a lot of fresh perspective, and you will not even know the amount of things that you learn by interacting with people. I think I learned the most by actually interacting with people and learning from their experience, and that diversity of experience is extremely important. One of the big reasons international MBAs are so powerful is because they bring people from different walks of life into the classroom and teach them the same thing, right? That's why it's extremely challenging, but also extremely rewarding. And that's what true global leadership is about. You are going to manage teams across multiple places and get different perspectives, people with different backgrounds. So I think it's extremely important for all of us to do that. I have been encouraging my teams to do that a lot more. Spend the times, go meet people, meet people. In fact, through COVID, there was this service that is there called the Lunch Club. I would encourage people to join that, and at least, and uh, this actually through COVID actually became even more popular, because earlier it was physically meeting people for lunch, which required some amount of coordination. But Lunch Club is just you set up a meeting, and it's like a blind professional date, where you're met up with people. You say that on Friday evening, these are the times that I would like, or Friday morning, these slots. You get randomly selected.
mm.
You say these are my preferences, and you get selected, and you learn some pretty interesting things that you learn. In fact, our relationship also, Rusty, is through one such podcast
That
based
is true.
connect through Flywheel, right?
That is true.
And I learned a lot through the interaction with you, which I wouldn't have otherwise had I been completely inwardly focused. And I think it's important for us to do that.
So, Krishnan, tell me about, maybe you can think through your experience of working with people outside the company, but I'd love to hear an example of how that has impacted you as a leader, one of those relationships or interactions.
No, I think a lot of learnings that I get in terms of how I apply things to this one, how I get confidence, comes from my interactions. Uh, what I have realized is within the company, sometimes at the role that I play, it's fairly lonely at the top, right? When you don't have too many leaders to actually brainstorm or to provide that counterpoint of view to what you are bringing to the table. Either sometimes you may not provide that. You may not regard that opinion as extremely important, or they may not be strong enough to challenge your point of view with the right amount of data. So what I have felt is having the conversations with peers outside, learning how other organizations are doing things, etc., helps me either challenge my own decisions or also shape my decisions in some ways. Also, it brings a lot of credibility into what we bring to the table. Suppose I go and tell somebody that I want to open an office in Canada, right? Somebody will say, why? What's he smoking right now that he wants to open an office? But if I go and tell, I've been speaking to services companies, at least five of them have opened offices, they've built academic relationships, and they find that as a great cost leverage center, and they're seeing a lot of their clients moving operations to this. Now, this makes my same ask a bit more, I would say, wholesome and powerful when I bring this. So that's the important thing about leadership, is to bring that full perspective into this and is able to power your decision, right? So you look at a person who is well thought through, well connected, and being able to bring that. And I think that's extremely important. Rather than you just bringing ideas, you're bringing ideas which are corroborated with actual evidence that'll be there.
Yeah.
I have actually come up with interesting ideas, and things that I've developed at work have come from such interactions.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that these two themes that we've talked about, this willingness to confront challenge, to take risk, and reaching outside your organization, they're related, because for many people, spending time outside their organization feels like a risk because it's time away from doing the things that are your job and your core set of responsibilities. And so they're connected in that way, and yet they're both very powerful accelerators. Krishnan, we're running up against the end of our time here, but I want to thank you for this, because I think it's so valuable to hear your stories, to hear your perspective, just this emphasizing that mindset can be such a key driver of success. And the mindset is really a willingness to stretch and learn and grow and confront challenge and move forward. If people want to connect with you, what's a way that they might be able to do that, to stay in touch and hear what you have to say?
Yeah, linkedin.com/Krishnan Venkata is one way to reach out to me. I'm fairly active on that. You can also drop a note to me at Krishnan, B for boy, V for Victor, @gmail.com. I'm happy to connect on that. LinkedIn is the easiest way to reach out to me for sure. And look forward to staying in touch and also hearing some of people's opinion about this, and happy to have the discussion. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm going to put the link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes here so anybody can find it. So once again, Krishnan, thank you so much for being here for this conversation today.
Thank you, Rusty, for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Do Something Different. Make sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share with your friends. You can also find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you want additional content beyond what's on the podcast, make sure to follow me on LinkedIn and at my website, rustygaylord.com.